All right, so we have fun things happening in real time. This is a good opportunity to talk about other reasoning models, O1, O3. Just now, OpenAI, as perhaps expected, released o3-mini. What are we expecting from the different flavors? Can you just lay out the different flavors of the O models and from Gemini, the reasoning model?
Something I would say about these reasoning models is we talked a lot about reasoning training on math and code. And what is done is that you have the base model we've talked about a lot on the internet. You do this large-scale reasoning training with reinforcement learning. And then what the DeepSeek paper detailed in this R1 paper, which for me is one of the big open questions on how do you do this, is that they did reasoning heavy, but very standard post-training techniques after the large-scale reasoning RL. So they did the same things with a form of instruction tuning through rejection sampling, which is essentially heavily filtered instruction tuning with some reward models. And then they did this RLHF, but they made it math heavy. So some of this transfer, we looked at this philosophical example early on. One of the big open questions is how much does this transfer? If we bring in domains after the reasoning training, are all the models going to become eloquent writers by reasoning? Is this philosophy stuff going to be open? We don't know in the research of how much this will transfer. There's other things about how we can make soft verifiers and things like this, but there is more training after reasoning, which makes it easier to use these reasoning models, and that's what we're using right now. So if we're going to talk about with o3-mini and O1, these have gone through these extra techniques that are designed for human preferences after being trained to elicit reasoning.
I think one of the things that people are ignoring is Google's Gemini Flash Thinking is both cheaper than R1 and better.
Yeah.
And they released it in the beginning of December.
And nobody's talking about it.
No one cares.
It has a different flavor to it. Its behavior is less expressive than something like O1, or it has fewer tracks that it is on. Quen released a model last fall, QWQ, which was their preview reasoning model. And DeepSeek had R1 Lite last fall, where these models kind of felt like they're on rails, where they really, really only can do math and code. And O1 it can answer anything. It might not be perfect for some tasks, but it's flexible. It has some richness to it. And this is kind of the art of how is a model a little bit undercooked? It's it's good to get a model out the door, but it's hard to gauge and it takes a lot of taste to be is this a full-fledged model? Can I use this for everything? They're probably more similar for math and code. My quick read is that Gemini Flash is not trained the same way as O1, but taking an existing training stack, adding reasoning to it. So taking a more normal training stack and adding reasoning to it. And I'm sure they're going to have more. I mean, they've done quick releases on Gemini Flash, so reasoning, and this is the second version from the holidays. It's evolving fast, and it takes longer to make this training stack where you're doing this large scale.
Ask it the same question from earlier. The one about the
human nature.
Yeah.
What was the human nature one?
The way why I can ramble about this so much is that we've been working on this at AI2 before O1 was fully available to everyone and before R1, which is essentially using this RL training for fine tuning. We use this in our Tulu series of models, and you can elicit the same behaviors where you say wait and so much on, but it's so late in the training process that this kind of reasoning expression is much lighter. So there's essentially a gradation, and just how much of this RL training you put into it determines how the output looks.
So we're now using Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking Experimental 121.
Okay. It summarized the prompt as humans self-domesticated apes.
Okay. All right. So wait, is this revealing the reasoning? Here's why this is a novel. Okay.
Click to expand.
Click to expand.
Okay. Analyze the request. Novel is the key word.
See how it just looks a little different? It looks like a normal output.
Yeah, in some sense, it's better structured. It makes more sense. And
when it latched onto human, and then it went into organisms, and oh wow.
Apex predator, focus on domestication, apply domestication to humans, explore the idea of self-domestication.
Not good. Not good.
Where is this going? Refine and articulate the insight, greater facial expressiveness and communication ability, yes. Plasticity and adaptability, yes. Dependence on social groups, yes. All right. And self-critique and refine further. Is this truly novel? Is it well supported? So on and so forth. And the insight it's getting at is humans are not just social animals, but profoundly self-domesticated apes. And this self-domestication is the key to understanding our unique cognitive and social abilities. Self-domesticated apes.
I prefer the DeepSeek response.
I mean, it's novel. The insight is novel. I mean, that's like a good book title, Self-Domesticated Apes. Like there could be a case made for that. I mean, yeah, it's cool. And it's revealing the reasoning. It's magical. It's magical. Like this is really powerful. Hello, everyone. This is Lex with a quick intermission recorded after the podcast. Since we reviewed responses from DeepSeek R1 and Gemini Flash 2.0 thinking during this conversation, I thought at this moment it would be nice to insert myself quickly doing the same for OpenAI o1 Pro and o3-mini with the same prompt. The prompt being, give one truly novel insight about humans. And I thought I would, in general, give my vibe check and vibe-based anecdotal report on my own experiences with the new o3-mini model now that I got a chance to spend many hours with it in different kinds of contexts and applications. So I would probably categorize this question as, let's say, open-ended philosophical question. And in particular, the emphasis on novelty, I think, is a nice way to test one of the capabilities of the model, which is come up with something that makes you pause and almost surprise you with its brilliance. So that said, my general review after running each of the models on this question a bunch of times is that o1 Pro consistently gave brilliant answers. Ones that gave me pause and made me think, both cutting in its insight and just really nicely phrased, with wit, with clarity, with nuance, over and over, consistently generating the best answers. After that is R1, which is less consistent, but again, delivered brilliance. Gemini Flash 2.0 thinking was third. And last was o3-mini, actually. It often gave quite a generic answer, at least to my particular sensibilities. That said, in a bunch of other applications that I tested for brainstorming purposes, it actually worked extremely well and often outperformed R1. But on this open-ended philosophical question, it did consistently worse. Now, another important element for each of these models is how the reasoning is presented. DeepSeek R1 shows the full chain of thought tokens, which I personally just love. For these open-ended philosophical questions, it's really, really interesting to see the model think through it. But really also just stepping back, me as a person who appreciates intelligence and reasoning and reflection, reading these kind of chain of thought raw tokens of R1, there's something genuinely beautiful about observing the path of deliberation in an intelligent system. I think we don't always have that explicitly laid out for us humans. So to see it in another intelligent system, the nonlinearity of it, akin to Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, it's just beautiful to watch. Anyway, as we discussed in the episode, DeepSeek R1 talked about humans being able to convert selfish desires into cooperative systems by collectively pretending abstract rules like money laws and rights are real. And these shared hallucinations act as games where competition is secretly redirected to benefit the group, turning conflict into society's fuel. Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking said, humans are not just social animals, but self-domesticated apes. And this self-domestication is the key to understanding our unique cognitive and social abilities. Now, it's important to say that the chain of thought there was really interesting. It was looking through the entire evolution of life on Earth, considering apex predators, and considering how from that we ended up to where we are. I think that domestication by choice is a really interesting angle. Again, it's one of those things when somebody presents a different angle on a seemingly obvious thing, it just makes me smile. And the same with DeepSeek R1, that these hallucinations of money, laws, and rights, and us collectively pretending like it's real, and we play games with them that look like competition when secretly we're just cooperating with each other. And that is the fuel of progress. Beautifully put. Now, OpenAI o1 Pro consistently over and over delivered bangers. I can go through many of them, but the first one was humans are the only species that turns raw materials into symbolic resources, then uses those symbols to reorganize the very materials they came from, creating a closed feedback loop between meaning and matter. Here, I just ran it again. Banger after banger, I'm telling you. Humans are unique among known species in that they simultaneously rewrite two layers of reality, the external world and their own private mental landscapes, and then merge these two rewritten layers into a continuous personal narrative that feels objectively true. Feels true. This is poetry. Okay, and then o3-mini high for me was smart, fast, actually, and kind of generic. Never quite got there for me. So here's the first one I got from o3-mini. Humans are not fixed beings, but rather ongoing narratives, dynamic stories that we continuously write, edit, and reinterpret. This narrative plasticity is more than just memory or self-reflection. It's an intrinsic cognitive process that acts like an internal error correction system. It allows us to adapt our identities and values over time in response to new experiences, challenges, and social contexts. Now, it almost sneaks up to something approximating cutting insight with narrative plasticity in quotes. But then it goes back to the sort of the generic. I don't know. All of these models are incredible for different reasons. There's a lot of concerns, as we discussed in this episode, but there's a lot of reasons to be excited as well. And I've probably spoken for too long. I am severely sleep deprived, borderline delirious. So hopefully some of this made sense. And now, dear friends, back to the episode.
I think when you to Nathan's point, when you look at like the reasoning models, to me, even when I used R1 versus O1, there was like that sort of rough edges around the corner feeling, right? And flash thinking, earlier, I didn't use this version, but the one from December, and it definitely had that rough edges around the corner feeling, right? Where it's just not fleshed out in as many ways, right? Sure, they added math and coding capabilities via these verifiers in RL, but it feels like they lost something in certain areas, and O1 is worse performing than chat in many areas as well, to be clear.
Not by a lot.
Not by a lot, though, right? And it's like like R1 definitely felt to me like it was worse than V3 in certain areas, like doing this RL expressed and learned a lot, but then it weakened in other areas. And so I think that's one of the big differences between these models and what O1 offers. And then OpenAI has O1 Pro. And what they did with O3, which is like also very unique, is that they stacked search on top of chain of thought, right? And so chain of thought is one thing where it's one chain, it backtracks, goes back and forth. But how they solved the ArcAGI challenge was not just the chain of thought. It was also sampling many times, i.e. running them in parallel and then selecting.
Is running in parallel actually search? Because I don't know if we have the full information on how O1 Pro works. So like I don't have enough information to confidently say that it is search.
It is parallel samples.
Yeah. And then
it selects something.
And we don't know what the selection function is. The reason why we're debating is because since O1 was announced, there's been a lot of interest in techniques called Monte Carlo tree search, which is where you will break down the chain of thought into intermediate steps. We haven't defined chain of thought. Chain of thought is from a paper from years ago where you introduce the idea to ask a language model that at the time was much less easy to use. You would say, let's verify step by step, and it would induce the model to do this bulleted list of steps. Chain of thought is now almost a default in models where if you ask it a math question, you don't need to tell it to think step by step. And the idea with Monte Carlo tree search is that you would take an intermediate point in that chain, do some sort of expansion, spend more compute, and then select the right one. That's like a very complex form of search that has been used in things like mu0 and AlphaZero potentially. I know mu0 does this.
Another form of search is just asking 5 different people and then taking the majority answer.
Yes.
Right? So there's a variety of it could be complicated, it could be simple. We don't know what it is, just
Yeah.
that they are not just issuing one chain of thought in sequence.
Yeah.
They're launching many in parallel. And in the Arc AGI, they launched 1,000 in parallel for their the one that like really shocked everyone, that beat the benchmark, was they would launch 1,000 in parallel, and then they would get the right answer like 80% of the time or 70% of the time, 90 maybe even. Whereas if they just launched one, it was like 30%.
There are many extensions to this. I would say the simplest one is that our language models to date have been designed to give the right answer the highest percentage of the time in one response. And we are now opening the door to different ways of running inference on our models, in which we need to reevaluate many parts of the training process, which normally opens the door to more progress, but we don't know if OpenAI changed a lot, or if just sampling more and multiple choice is what they're doing, or if it's something more complex where they change the training and they know that the inference mode is going to be different.
So we're talking about O1 Pro, $200 a month, and they're losing money. So the thing that we're referring to, this fascinating exploration of the test time compute space, is that actually possible? Do we have enough compute for that? Does the financials make sense?
So the fantastic thing is, and there, it's in the thing that I pulled up earlier, but the cost for GPT-3 has plummeted. If you scroll up just a few images, I think. The important thing about like, hey, is cost a limiting factor here, right? Like my view is that like we'll have like really awesome intelligence before we have like AGI, before we have it permeate throughout the economy. And this is sort of why that reason is, right? GPT-3 was trained in 2020, 2021. And the cost for running inference on it was $60, $70 per million tokens, right? Which is the cost per intelligence was ridiculous. Now, as we scaled forward 2 years, we've had a 1,200x reduction in cost to achieve the same level of intelligence as GPT-3.
So here on the x-axis is time over just a couple of years, and on the y-axis is log scale dollars to run inference on a million tokens.
Yeah, a million.
And so you have just a down, like a linear decline on log scale from GPT-3 through 3.5 to Llama.
It's like 5 cents or something like that now, right? Which is versus $60, 1,200x. That's not the exact numbers, but it's 1,200x. I remember that number is the humongous cost per intelligence, right? Now, the freak out over DeepSeek is, oh my God, they made it so cheap. It's like, actually, if you look at this trend line, they're not below the trend line, first of all, and at least for GPT-3, right? They are the first to hit it, right? Which is a big deal. But they're not below the trend line as far as GPT-3. Now we have GPT-4. What's going to happen with these reasoning capabilities, right? It's a mix of architectural innovations. It's a mix of better data, and it's going to be better training techniques, and all of these different better inference systems, better hardware, right? Going from each generation of GPU to new generations or ASICs, everything is going to take this cost curve down and down and down and down. And then can I just spawn 1,000 different LLMs to create a task and then pick from one of them, or whatever search technique I want, a tree, Monte Carlo tree search? Maybe it gets that complicated. Maybe it doesn't because it's too complicated to actually scale. Like, who knows? Bitter lesson, right? The question is I think when, not if, because the rate of progress is so fast, right? 9 months ago, Dario was saying, Dario said 9 months ago, the cost to train an inference was this, right? And now we're much better than this, right? And DeepSeek is much better than this. And that cost curve for GPT-4, which was also roughly $60 per million tokens when it launched, has already fallen to, $2 or so, right? And we're going to get it down to cents, probably, for GPT-4 quality, and the same, and then that's the base for the reasoning models like O1 that we have today, and O1 Pro is spawning multiple, right, and O3 and so on and so forth. These search techniques too expensive today, but they will get cheaper, and that's what's going to unlock the intelligence, right?